So I would say that there's a lot of questions that come up over the global events that are going on right now. What are your thoughts right now, Lewis?
With respect to what's happening with the sovereign debt across countries, that's going to extend probably into other countries. And you mentioned QE2. What people haven't really thought through is eventually that may end up on our doorstep. Unlike Ireland and Greece, the United States can call on the Federal Reserve to print up the difference on the debt that we owe.
Yep.
Our debt levels are fairly high, and I read somewhere that they're basically at similar levels to where Greece is. We have the advantage, or maybe it's a disadvantage, of being the world's reserve currency. So as you mentioned, when we have political uncertainty, geopolitical uncertainty in Korea, people rush towards the U.S. dollar.
Yep.
But they're not really looking at the underlying fiscal stability of the United States. When I say fiscal stability, I mean it's not as if the United States balance sheet is clean and we are a creditor nation. Indeed, we are a debtor nation.
Yep.
We definitely take advantage of being the reserve currency and having the ability to do things like QE1 and QE2. But those days may be numbered. I don't know if you saw, Germany was very upset about the concept, as were many of the other G20 nations, that the United States was, in a sense, perhaps abusing its ability to try to lower interest rates and just buy up debt.
Absolutely. And I think they basically came right out and say that they were trying to devalue the dollar. That was the main play here. And I was talking last week on my show that, one of the main things with people in the real estate industry, they think that this was going to help the long-term mortgage rates. But what most people fail to realize is that a lot of what's being bought up right now are the treasuries and not the long-term mortgage-backed securities.
They're all the short-term, right, they're the short-term obligations.
Yeah, like the 2, the 3, the 7, and the 10-year treasury bonds, which are guaranteed by our government, unlike the, mortgage-backed securities, the Fannie Mae 30 and the Ginnie Mae. So I know you've been watching it. Rates have been creeping upwards because what happens is that, the stock market is forward-looking. Ultimately, they know that the inflation is inevitable. It's just a matter of when. Correct. So, I tell people, as, just a way of looking at things, or the real estate market today, is that, if you're happy where interest rates are today and you plan on buying a house, it really has been one of the most historically low interest rate times, and it makes complete sense to buy if you're able to. Go ahead.
It makes sense to buy, but I think over time what's happened, as we've had over the last 20, 30 years, a combination of real estate agents, the National Association of Realtors, and basically experience on the side that real estate is the best investment. You can't do better than real estate. They're not making any more of it. You're paying yourself, and so on. And we saw home ownership rates rise up to, I think, 71% just a couple of years ago. That number's dropped back down closer to 60. What's the problem with that is that home ownership was always a smart bet when you didn't have the massive amounts of intervention in the real estate market through Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and the perpetual lowering of interest rates. Because what that did is it encouraged people who otherwise couldn't afford a home to go ahead and buy a home. And if you remember, the entreaties of the mortgage brokers was buy as much house as you can because, you leverage that and it's going to go up.
Right.
That turned out to be not correct. So people have been looking at homes as an investment, and I think now they really should be looking at a home not necessarily as an investment, but as a home, something that they want and can afford to buy. Because I think you mentioned earlier, a Washington Post article today, over the weekend,
yep,
where people are paying close to half of their money to pay either the rent or to pay their mortgage. And that becomes a problem when you have if it's half of the income of a two-wage earner family.
Yeah.
So what's happened with pricing of homes is they became high as a result of the easy availability to credit, and now they've come down. Credit isn't easily available. Interest rates are low, but in many instances, the home prices are maybe too high if you have to pay 50% of your available income to service your mortgage.
Right. Now, the question I have, I mean, you're located out in California, here in the Washington, D.C. metro area. I'm noticing that the inventory levels are a lot lower than what the national average is. I mean, in some areas in Northern Virginia, I mean, we've only got a couple months' supply. So,
right, and I think that's a function of a healthy job market. But
yeah.
the job market, and it's interesting, we do a national survey, but we also slice and dice the data regionally and then for about 18 states. And the interesting thing about Maryland and Virginia is they rely heavily on government workers.
Right.
And government workers, the world's been kind to them in the last couple of years with the Obama administration. There's been job creation. There's also been increases in wages. So it's understandable that the housing market there is in fairly good stead because there's demand.
Yep.
However, with the new Republican Congress and with a bunch of deficit reduction proposals on the table, for example, if they were to reduce the government workers or certain agencies by 10%, that could put a dent in the Virginia market. And I remember back in January of 2008, New York had been pretty much left unscathed from the real estate crisis because Wall Street was still doing well. Well, you know what happened at the end of 2008, and the New York market started to take a hit as well. So a lot of these things come in ebbs and flows depending on where you are, because basically one of the things that we learned from our real estate agents at HomeGain is they basically have told me not individually, but in the aggregate, that housing prices are a function of supply and demand.
Yep.
You've got foreclosures, and that can impact it, shadow inventory, and so on. Interest rates, which we already touched on, and they can probably only go higher.
Yep.
Employment levels, but then also income levels. And then there's that basic psychology. What do people think of owning a home? And what I just want to share with you, I ran across a Rasmussen poll about people's concept of home ownership, and in February of 2009, 73% of the surveyed people thought that buying a home was the best investment families could make. Last month, that was down to 60%, and in the current survey, they say only 52% of adults believe that, and that adults over 40 tend to believe it more, and that adults under 40 are not quite so sure. So what that tells me is a lot of young people probably, and there hasn't been many studies on there, any study that I've seen, have probably been through either a friend or their own experience where their parent lost a home.
Right.
So even if employment rates pick up and these kids go out and get jobs, going out and buying a home probably isn't at the top of their list.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things that really you tie into nationally. Now, in Virginia, I'm not sure how many of the workers are fresh in to the government jobs or have been there for a while, and then there's more stability.